So Jericho stopped eating his food. I think it's because it was in the freezer for too long, and cats are very picky and finicky about freshness. But this is a blessing in disguise because I wanted to update his diet anyway. So I formulated a new recipe with more beef and more variety. I'm really excited about this change. I've tried it out the past few days and it is going better. He's more willing to eat his food. He's enjoying it. And it's also going a little better with the help of some magic sprinkles here and there and this superfood that I completely changed my mind about. Hey friends, it's Jess and Jericho, and I'm going to take you through the entire process, how I plan, formulate, get his ingredients, prep everything, store everything, and serve Jericho's 100% homemade raw diet. Plus, an extra tip for you if your cat is still too picky no matter what you try. So, planning the diet and formulating the diet. I just joined Paws of Prey's membership, and I also bought her cat formulator. So this is the formulation spreadsheet. It's really, really great. The membership is helpful because she does meal reviews and she also has a lot of perks like cheat sheets and how to balance. And the formulator is one of the best that I've used. I've tried Raw Fed and Nerdies and also Animal Diet Formulator. And Paws of Prey, she has a really unique feature that isn't in the other two. So she includes this pie chart that breaks down the amount of muscle meat, muscular organ, liver, second secreting organ, and bone. And this is really helpful because you can see the percentages of what you currently have in your diet, and you can use this as a guide to formulate. So if you don't know how to formulate, if you aren't a nutritionist, this is really helpful because you basically just play with the numbers until the percentages match, and she includes what she feels is ideal. And this is basically what, would match a mouse or quail, something that the cat would eat in the wild. So this is really helpful when you're formulating. So Jericho's diet consists of about 54% muscle meat, and that includes ground turkey, that includes ground beef. I've also included beef stew chunks just so that he has something to chew on aside from the bones. I'm also using sardines. These are canned in water, and they do include the skin and bones. And then chicken wing has muscle meat on there, so that contributes to that category. And it also contributes to the bone, which is around 8% in this recipe. For muscular organs, he's at 25%. That includes beef green tripe, this stinky superfood, and beef heart. Liver is at 4%. Right now I'm using turkey liver. The second secreting organ section is at 7%, around 7%. And I'm actually using two here. So I'm using beef kidney and I'm using beef spleen. These all add up to about 98% instead of 100% because there are decimals, within each category. I just kept it simple and rounded to the next whole number. For this guaranteed analysis numbers, we have 70% moisture, 18.5% protein, and 9% fat. So this is really good, high moisture, high meat-based protein, and the fat is exactly half the amount of protein that we want. So that's perfect. Now I've got some supplements that I have to add, like vitamin E oil, but I'm going to gradually introduce that, and that'll also be fresh at mealtime. That's to add vitamin E. Vitamin E typically is lower in animal-based foods, and we don't want to use plant-based foods, so we would use the E oil. Additionally, I might add some bone meal powder to balance out the calcium and phosphorus, but I am using sardines that include bone, so I might not need to add it. And then the other concern is the B vitamin thiamine, which is typically lower, but it's only a tiny, tiny bit low. If I absolutely need to use nutritional yeast, I will, but I'll have to decide. And like I said, I'm going to gradually add these supplements because some of the meat ingredients are new to his diet. So the Paws of Prey cat formulator also has a batch tab, so you can type out the amount of days, weeks, or months that you want to batch out. So I did this for about 6.5 days instead of 7 days because Jericho also eats whole prey day-old chicks and whole prey week-old baby quail. And these weights vary. Sometimes they're 1.2 ounces, sometimes they're like 2 ounces. So I figured that this would be approximately a day and a half's worth of food for him. but I'd rather have a little extra than not have enough. So I did 6.5 days worth of this recipe, and then the remaining 1.5 days will be whole prey. But I spread it out evenly among the entire week. He also eats 2 raw chicken egg yolks per week. Sometimes he doesn't finish it all, but I offer it, and then if he doesn't finish it, I'll save it for the next day. So I used to buy all of his ingredients online. I am still going to have to buy tripe and whole prey online because those aren't human quality ingredients, human grade quality ingredients. So I'll still have to buy those online. I get that from Raw Feeding Miami. Have a discount link in the description if you want to try as well. But for the bulk of his recipe, I'm going back to the farmer's market because basically whatever he doesn't eat, I'll just finish. And I'm going to buy all of this from the farmer's market once a month. So whatever remains, like chicken wings and the heart and the beef, I'm just gonna eat. So also along with the planning, I'm going to type out the amount of weight per item. That way I can just kind of keep track of how much I need per month, because some of them aren't exactly 1 pound. And I'm also noting down the cost per pound just so I can keep track of that as well. And that will help with planning for next month. This is the first time that I'm doing it with this specific recipe. So let's talk about portioning his food next. And I used to thaw Jericho's all of his food like 3 days in advance in the refrigerator. It took up the entire bottom shelf, but I found a new way to thaw his food that's really, really helpful. So now what I do is take this big tub and put it in the tub and I fill it with cold water, and then I put everything into a large garbage bag. And this only took about 2 hours to thaw completely. Then I take a separate large garbage bag and I put that into the refrigerator with all of the meat ingredients in that bag. And I use a separate bag because this bag in the tub actually got a hole in it. But I use the other garbage bag in the refrigerator just in case there's a hole in any of the meat bags. This garbage bag is going to prevent any juices from leaking out and getting all over the refrigerator. So for meal prep setup, I use this food grade silicone mat. This keeps my area sanitary and it also makes cleanup very easy. So I just put everything on top of the mat, keep it all in one place. And I use 1 container that I'm going to prep out 1 week's worth of food for this week. Then I have 3 vacuum sealed bags that I put inside of stand-up bags, and that's going to be for the rest of the month. So I'm prepping enough food for 4 weeks total. So what I'm going to do is weigh out each ingredient that I need for each week, throw it in the container and throw it into the bags. And I also save the juices from the thawed meat, which is important because there's myoglobin and other nutrients in those juices. So once I have everything done, I put everything that I don't need back in the freezer. Then I portion out this week's food. So first what I like to do is cut the bones. I cut the chicken wings, put those into a separate jar. That way I can divvy them out evenly throughout the week. Next, I take out the chunks of muscle meat and the heart to cut that up into bite-sized pieces. And I like to do this just to keep them kind of larger pieces, just so that Jericho has something to chew other than the bones. Then I'll pull out the secreting organs and I'll cut those up into smaller pieces. They are extremely nutrient dense, so I like to spread them out evenly throughout the week, and I like to cut them up in very tiny pieces just that way so that it's more even throughout the week. And I cut it over this plate instead of over the container because one time I actually cut the glove a little bit and a piece fell into the food. So I want to make sure that it doesn't go into the entire container of the food because then it'll get lost. So I cut it over the plate. That way, if a piece does fall out, I can pick it out very easily and I can actually see it. So then I'm going to add that back and add the secreting organs back into where the ground meat is, mix it up really well, mix all the chunks in there as well. That way everything is kind of spread out evenly throughout the week. Then I get out my digital scale, weigh each day's worth of food, put it into 1 container. So I'm going to put 1 full day into 1 container. And then I'm going to put 2 days worth of food in the refrigerator just so that it's fresh. And then I return the rest of it to the freezer. Once everything is all done, I'll split up his sardine portions into each day's container. Used to feed it fresh each day, like from the can, because I used to eat sardines every day, but I don't think I can do that anymore. So I'm going to portion out these daily sardines into each day. And I do this last because Jericho goes crazy as soon as he hears the can. So I portion everything out, clean up, then do the sardines so that I can give him a little bit and then portion out each day's worth into each container. Now for vacuum sealing, previously I would wait until the meats were completely frozen solid so that none of the moisture would come up when I'm using the vacuum sealer. But the problem with this is once it's in the freezer, even if I put it inside of a sealable freezer safe bag, there's still ice and freezer burn on it. So that kind of defeats the purpose of using the vacuum sealer. But you don't want to do it immediately after you portion the food because there's a lot of moisture and it's like soft and mushy. So there's still going to be air in the container and a lot of the moisture is going to come out. Now the vacuum sealer does have a drip tray, so it will catch the moisture and it isn't going into the whole machine. I'm not using a pump. It's just going into the drip tray. So what I did this time was I put it in the freezer for about 5 hours. So it was frozen to the point where there wasn't a big pool of moisture, but it was still malleable. I was still able to kind of make it flat and take up more space so that it wasn't just a big block of food. And when I did the vacuum sealer, there wasn't as much moisture that came out. I think only one of the 3 packages actually had some moisture that came out. And it was a tiny minimal amount. So I took it from the drip tray and just poured it into the containers where I saved the 𝐤𝐄𝐄, and that'll just add for each week when I portion his food. So now let's talk about thawing and serving your cat's food. So I portioned Jericho's food all in one container for 1 day, and I put that in the refrigerator 24 hours before needing it. So when I feed breakfast, I put one of his frozen containers into the refrigerator for the next day. That night, I will portion it into 2 containers so that I have 2 servings and 2 separate dishes because he eats 2 meals a day. I also add a little bit of water to his food. For his meal that I'm currently about to serve, I will put that container in a warm water bath, and I keep the food in a sealed container because you don't want to rinse off the juices and the nutrients. That myoglobin is rich in nutrients. So I'll keep this in the warm water bath for about 10 minutes if there's bones and whole prey, because they take a little bit longer to warm up to room temp. If it's only meat and organs, then I'll just do about 5 minutes. Like in the morning, he doesn't eat bones, so I just do about 5 minutes in the morning. You can check the water if it gets cold. Sometimes I find that with the chicken wing drums, since they're bigger, it might cool down the water, so before that time is up. So I'll just dump it, put new warm water in it. And I feed Jericho on this food grade silicone mat because it's nice and flat, it's large. I like to spread it out just so he has space to walk around and chew. And if he's being super picky about his food, I will use this magic freeze-dried beef liver, and I break off a tiny little piece, crush it between my fingers so that it becomes dust, and that's his little garnish smell attractant. I also do this with salmon, anything really that has a strong smell. But if you're only using a tiny, tiny bit, it's not going to add like a big boost of nutrients. Really, you're just using it for the smell attractant. But ever since I've been portioning out Jericho's daily sardines into each container, he's actually eating his food without the smell attractants. So he loves that fishy smell and those sardines, and it's only about 6% of his diet, so I'm not like overdoing it with the fish. He just gets small amounts in the morning and in the evening. So some overall rules as a recap when you're thawing and serving raw food. You'll always want to thaw raw food in the refrigerator at least 24 hours before you need it. If you're thawing a huge block of food, you might need longer than that. The other alternative is to put it in a cold water bath. Remember to keep everything in a sealed container just in case there's holes or anything in the bag. You want to make sure that those nutrients in the liquid don't leach out into the water. You don't want to rinse off those nutrients. So you can keep it in a cold bath, make sure the water stays cold. It likely will if the food is frozen. So that's a quick way to thaw it. And you don't want to thaw meat at room temperature out on the counter for hours. You're just going to invite the growth of bacteria if you do that. You don't want to use the microwave because that's going to cook it, and frankly, using a microwave is not good anyway. When you're serving the food, you want to include all of those juices. So that liquid that comes out of muscular meat, that's actually myoglobin and not blood. So myoglobin is a protein that adds that red tint to the liquid. It's also good moisture. So you want to make sure you include those nutrients when you're feeding the food. The other thing you want to do is when you're serving your food, serve it on a flat surface, as flat as you can get it. A shallow plate works fine, but the flatter you can get it, the better. So I like the food grade silicone mat that I use. There's a little lip on the edge of it so that liquid doesn't spill off of the mat, but it isn't high enough to cause problems. The reason that we use flat surfaces is because out in the wild, cats eat on the ground, which is flat, but they also have nerve endings in their whiskers and they don't like it when things touch their whiskers while they're eating or drinking. This has caused whisker stress, also called whisker fatigue. So constantly feeling things, plus if you're using a bowl, it might, when your cat's licking, the food might go up the sides and it might be difficult for the cat to eat it. So as flat as you can get it is better. You'll also want to avoid plastic. Plastic traps bacteria no matter how many times you wash it. You might notice that there's some chin acne that happens typically when we're feeding our cats on plastic dishes. So better to use ceramic or stainless steel or glass. Like I mentioned, the food grade silicone mat that I use, everything that you need is linked in the description. Don't leave raw food out for longer than I would say about 20 minutes. Your cat should finish up his food within that time. Jericho's, it's like not even 1 minute. But if your cat isn't finishing all of the food within that time, you can scoop it up, put it in a sealed container, put it back in the refrigerator, and then serve it at his next meal. And I would say after the next day, if he doesn't eat it, just toss it. It's probably going to be a small amount anyway. Of course, never feed any food that has an off smell, but cats' noses are much stronger than ours, so they might be picking up something that's just off or not fresh about the food. So just feed him the next day, and then I would say toss it. Sometimes I do that with the egg yolks. He doesn't always eat all of it. Sometimes he leaves the little pieces behind, and I'll just add it to his food and he'll eat it the next day. And as always, everything that you need is in the description. I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Hope you and your cats have a wonderful day.